Okay. So, hi, Randy. How are you?
Hi.
Good afternoon. Okay, so we're here today and we're recording this for viewers who might be interested in taking part in a very, very special program that you have brought into Evolved Education for kids who are going to be going through the admissions process this fall for middle school and high school in particular. And we're calling it the pre-application skill building course. And I wanted everyone who is interested just to get a little bit from you, from the source, as to what this is, why is it of value to their kids, and we're going to talk about that today. Yeah. So first of all, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and just let them know a little bit about yourself and what you do here, and then we'll get into the program.
Yeah, sure. My name is Randi Dumont. I work in the school placement division at Evolved. So I work mostly with families looking to place their children in middle school entry points or high school entry points. And I've spent most of my career actually on the other side of this process as an admission counselor at a very selective private school. And I loved the work, but now I'm on the other side of the table as a consultant. And I think just being able to engage with families on the front end of this now in a more sort of intentional and intimate kind of way, I think has been awesome. But I think my experience in, the early parts of my career, just doing the admission work has really given me a lot of insight into what families need to effectively prepare for this process, specifically the kids that are going through this process, because the kids that I work with are older. So, they do require more agency in this process than younger kids might.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's just get right into it. So, what brought this program to your mind as you were going through the process this fall? I know we had a couple of conversations and you really saw a need for this program based on the work you were doing. So, tell us a little bit about the organic way this came about in your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always trying to figure out what fills my cup. That's really sort of the starting point for me. And I love working with the kids. I like working with the parents too, for sure, and just holistically with families. But I think the work that brings me the most joy is really connecting with kids and providing them, a safe space to be themselves and talk about their lives. And this one-on-one work that we do, especially at Evolved, I think really speaks to just the I think passion that I have for celebrating the individual. Like and I think that the impetus of this whole project or this skill building program came from what brings me joy, but also what's going to be helpful in within the realm of my expertise, which is in admissions consulting. And I think that in my 10 years interviewing, I interviewed I think like 200 kids an admission cycle, and then read even more applications per admission cycle. And over a course of 10 years, do the math, that's thousands of kids that I've met, and stories that I've heard, and essays that I've read. And one thing that really would stand out to me is I think kids would often come into this space, whether it's the interview or the writing process, and I think they would feel the weight and the gravity of it, because I think that a lot of people approach this process feeling stressed or feeling like there's an intensity about it. It's high stakes. And that's societal and cultural, so I think that's outside the control of a lot of people. But so naturally they would come to this process feeling like they had to be a certain way in order to sort of nail the process, and like in order to be appealing, how do I be an appealing candidate? And I think that oftentimes for kids it's too much for them to try to calculate or curate what are the right responses. Like I would see a lot of kids approaching this process as like, how do I study for this? Which is more, I think, connected to the skills that they already have as students, is like, how do I study for this test? What do they want to hear from me? What are the questions I'm probably going to have to answer? And I would hear a lot of kind of scripted, unoriginal, just sort of baseline, vague responses. They were safe, and they were practicing, how to respond to certain questions like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Which is fine. Preparation is fine, but the kind of preparation that kids were doing, I think was, to me, felt very like, very scripted and very much like, how do I study for the test? What's the content? And the answer is the content is in here. So there is no, I think, and now on this side of the process as a consultant, we've had families come to us sort of, a week before an interview and say, hey, can you prep our kid for an interview? Thinking that all their child needs is a list of the questions that this school will likely ask them, and then practice answering those. But the reality is that this process is not so systematized that every time a kid goes to X school, they're going to experience the same exact interview. That's just, it's not how schools approach this process. I do think that they try to structure it loosely, but you're not, even if you do know those questions, you can sometimes get arrested by, the pressure of the situation, or you have, you're remembering what you've studied and you're like, oh, I missed a part, and then the kids get all frazzled. So, that was really kind of the impetus of this project, was what brings me joy, what work do I like doing, and where is there a need? And I really felt like there was a need in terms of the pre-application skill building, because it's really hard to build those introspective and articulation skills when you're in the middle of the process.
Absolutely. So let's get into that just a little bit. So if families are listening, they might be then wondering, which I think I would be wondering, is just tell me, for example, what do you mean by introspective skills? And what do you mean by my child should be working right now on a certain set of skills versus a week before the interview? What are they even doing during this time? Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, like, introspection, just at its baseline, is being able to look inside, and, have a greater sense of self and a greater understanding of self. So that means a lot, right? Like, that's a huge umbrella. You could have greater introspection into your habits versus how your what's driving your decision making in certain areas. So introspection touches a lot of kinds of being, and a lot of the behaviors that we have. But I think, it's more, we're trying to build, this holistic introspection and just help kids, I think, slow down their lives to sit and think about what is meaningful to them and why. So, to me, that really means helping kids build language to operationalize what they're actually saying. So, for example, a kid might say, it's really important for me to have good friends in my life, right? Like that's a statement that you hear from a lot of different kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on the surface, of course, like, that makes sense. They want to be surrounded by good friends, good people, right? Well, that may mean something different to me. Like, I may define good friends differently than you might define good friends, right? So it's helping kids, I think, deepen, first of all, their understanding, because accessing that understanding is an entirely different skill set than articulating it, right? So we're teaching kids, how to access it by pushing them deeper into well, what do you mean by good friends? So, okay, then they say, well, I just want to be around nice people. Okay, well, what do those behaviors of nice look like to you? Because I might define that as, being thoughtful of others, which even then you could operationalize further to, you know, sending somebody a birthday card. That's maybe a more exact, you know, definition of somebody that's thoughtful, right? So it's pushing them, you know, to deepen their layers of this introspection and then helping them attach language to that. So it's two different skill sets that we're building here. We're building access to the content. So remember, we're talking about like, well, how do I prepare? What do I study? This is what you're studying. It's in here. And we're deepening that content and enriching that substance. And then we're helping kids figure out, how do I say this? How do I actually say this? Whether it's in a conversation or whether it's in response to an essay question that is, you know, tell me about the, you know, your proudest moment as a student, something like that. You know, so it's building those two, you know, very different skill sets, you know, in a timeline that allows you to be more intentional, move slower, and not expect a child to be able to do all of this in, you know, 3 sessions or 1 week before the interview. This is not something you cram for, in other words.
Right. Absolutely. Makes such good sense. And I guess what I would just say as someone who's also does the work similar to you, I feel that having a proactive service to help families to prepare in a way we know will help their child with this process is exactly in line with what we do here at Evolved. And I think it also helps a child to develop skills that are even beyond this work in and of itself. They're developing metacognition, they're developing the ability to articulate what's important to them. In fact, just as they are articulating what's important to them, they can then rely on that information to make decisions in their lives as preteens and teenage, you know, humans. So I just think there's so much value to what you're talking about. So I think this is a really exceptional offer. And we just wanted to, again, create this video just to give anyone who is interested. We're going to be sending this to some schools and offering it to our families and parents. And if you feel that your child would benefit from working with Randi on these skills, or if you feel like your students would benefit from working with Randi on these skills, then you can certainly email Randi. We'll put that in the notes as well, just so you'll have them, and set this up. Because we are aiming to do that now, is in the spring, in the summer, before the admissions process begins. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I was going to impress upon, just as a closing note, is that it's like a muscle that you're exercising, that you're training to be second nature. So that can't happen in, you know, mid-October when they're also doing 1 million other things. If you're trying to train and teach a skill, it's just like, you know, muscle memory to a certain extent. You have to be doing it farther out, and you have to be, this is also very personal work for kids. So you can't push them too quickly. And that's why, you know, the whole sort of trusted adult and building rapport is very important in creating a safe space for kids to explore and to learn how to articulate themselves, and, you know, and exercise self-expression. So that, you know, in terms of the timeline, I would just impress upon families that you do want to, you know, explore something like this sooner rather than later, even if it means jumping in, you know, in the middle of the summer. Even that's even a better timeline than trying to do it in the fall.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Randi, for bringing this to fruition and for offering it to our families and our community. I'm so excited to see where it goes. And I am so happy to offer this to everyone who's listening today. And again, if you are interested, you can reach us on our website. You can reach Randi at randi@evolveded.com. And we're looking forward to working further on this amazing project. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.